Starr 103.5 FM. Simply the best.
All right, it's time for us to get into a conversation on Ghana's elections and the work of the European Union Election Observation Mission. As I told you, Mark Stevens is in the studios with us. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning.
It's good to have you. This is not your first time in Ghana. You've already told me that.
Yeah, I was here for the 2012 elections, actually.
And how did you see that one?
How did I see that one? I was here with the Commonwealth by coincidence, and we followed the process and issued a report at the end. And it was an interesting election, very close, as we know. It eventually went to a legal case, which we weren't here for, but we did follow sort of from a distance. Okay. But from the election, we followed the election campaign and the voting and counting and the critical results process, which in Ghana is always a very important element, as it is everywhere else.
Right. And you've been here for 3 weeks already.
Yeah, the mission arrived on the 26th of October, and we got a 7-person team here in Accra. We're managing the mission and sort of in charge of it. And then we have 24 what we call long-term observers based in each of the regions of Ghana. We've got 2 teams actually in Ashanti and 2 for Accra because of the population size. And they're our people out in the region. So that's how we're structured at the moment.
You are here to observe.
Yes.
What have you observed so far?
Yeah, well, good that you stressed the word observe. Some people use the word monitoring and such things. We are observers. We're invited by the Electoral Commission. And it's always important to stress, we're independent, we're impartial, and critical is non-interference in the process. That's very much at the heart of our code of conduct. In terms of what we've observed so far, I mean, we're doing our job, and we basically build up all our information to a statement we issue after the election. Okay. But our observers are around, and here in the centre, we've been meeting, as they have in the regions, the political parties, the Electoral Commission at the national and regional levels, civil society groups. We've been monitoring the media coverage of the election as well. And our observers around the field have been following the election campaign and very much watching at the moment the Electoral Commission's preparations for the poll, all the materials which are being delivered. They've been following them on the recruitment of officials and also the training of officials, which is ongoing at the moment. So that's all, things are ticking along. I know there's a lot of focus in the centre on a lot of the court cases that have been going on, and it created a high degree of uncertainty, which we understand. But around the country, it seems the election is being sort of rolled out and things are moving forward, which is good to see.
Do you like what you see so far?
Well, we don't offer a judgment as we go along. I think, as to say, it's a bit. We like to use the word the methodology of election observation. We issue our statement after the election. So partly so that we offer a sort of comprehensive analysis and not a blow-by-blow account. Okay. But also because the principle of non-interference means not stepping into it and giving opinions as we go along. It's not our election, we're observing the process, and it's always important to stress.
So what would you be looking out for in particular?
Yeah, election observation does a very sort of comprehensive analysis. It's not just about the voters putting the votes in the ballot box, which is a critical aspect. But elections are about the legal framework. Does the legal framework of a country provide the rights for people to participate properly? Does it provide the sort of context for them to be able to sort of fulfill those rights and freedoms? How is the Election Commission undertaking its work? How is the election campaign being conducted? As I said earlier, we monitor media coverage of the election to see whether there's a fair and balanced coverage and the people of a country get access to a wide variety of voices. We then look at the preparations for the election day itself, the voting, the counting, and the results transmission. And we also follow any election disputes which may pop up in the election, which has been the case here as well, yeah.
Right. So how strong is your presence? And by that I mean, what is the number of your membership?
Basically, on election day, we'll be about 85 people in total. At the moment, we're 31, and we'll be joined later by what we call our short-term observers. There's also, I think, 32 of those will be joining us. We'll train them here in Accra and then deploy them out around the country. So we'll have teams in each of the regions of the country. Although we don't have big numbers, we try to have a good coverage, and we try to have a good mix of urban and rural coverage, so we have more of a balanced observation. We also have a delegation coming from the European Parliament. There'll be a 6-person delegation, and we also cooperate with some of the EU member states who are in the country. So overall, it adds up to about 85 people.
85 people. Yeah. And again, you say you don't run commentary, so to speak, during the event, and it's only at the end of it and all that you do it. But you're invited by the Electoral Commission.
In this instance, we are. Well, yeah.
In this instance. Yeah. So what did the invitation say? That you should come and do what? Observe us, keep quiet and look around. And then when it's done, write a statement and go home?
Well, it doesn't actually get into that level of detail. It invites us to. Basically, the invitation always leads to is linked to the rights and responsibilities. Okay. So the responsibilities are about non-interference and impartiality, of course, which is perfectly correct as it is everywhere. In terms of the rights, it means that we have full access to the process. They confirm that if observers come, we'll be able to go out and we'll be able to meet with the election officials, meet political parties, and go about our business. It also confirms that we'll have the right to attend campaign rallies, to move around the country freely, and also to attend polling stations and with accreditation and such things.
Okay.
Because statement of the obvious, there's no point going to observe an election when you're denied any of those elements, because it would compromise your work.
So what would your report normally be about?
Yeah, well, we issue a statement 2 days after the elections, what we call our preliminary statement.
All right.
And it usually comes out in most countries before the final results are known, just because of the way the timing of the results goes. And we stress it's very much a preliminary statement up to that point. And it really will provide an analysis and an assessment of all the things I mentioned on the legal framework, campaign, conduct of the campaign, candidate nomination, voter registration, voting, counting, media coverage, everything. So we'll make an assessment of all those elements. And that assessment will be against the laws of Ghana, how the laws of Ghana said the election should be conducted. So was it done accordingly? But also we make an ultimate assessment against the relevant sort of international commitments to which Ghana has committed itself.
And who do you issue that report to?
To the people. I mean, it's in a press conference 2 days after the election. It's a public statement. And later we issue a final report where we come back, probably usually about 2 months after the election, and a final report. And critical in that final report, and I think that's closer to what the spirit of observation is, there's a whole series of recommendations for changes to the future. And we've seen some sort of reforms going on here in Ghana since the last elections. And quite a few of those reforms addressed things that we identified as well. So we like to make a contribution to the debate in a country, and a whole series of suggested changes for the future. But they are just suggestions, and ultimately it's up to every country to make its own decisions on how best it wants to run its election.
And is the exercise you're embarking on at your own cost?
The European Union funds itself, yeah.
It funds itself.
Yeah.
Okay.
So member states of the European Union contribute to the budget, and it's part of the EU's sort of human rights and development programming, as I understand it.
Okay. And then, is there any other sort of funding support that the EU brings on board as well, apart from the observation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm here for the observation mission. I'm not representing the EU per se.
Okay.
But I am aware that the EU has a long program of support for Ghana in a whole variety of areas, as you probably know better than I. But in the election domain and governance, they're supporting some of the constitutional commissions that exist, like the Electoral Commission, like the NCCE, I think the National Media Council, is it? Commission, sorry. And so a host of those, and it's providing support to them during the electoral process as well.
All right.
And the EU had a big mission here in 2008. It had a team here in 2012. They also sent a team here in the summer for the voter registration updates and things. So it's a very sort of serious long-term commitment to supporting Ghana.
Would you have any general comments on the landscape so far, what you have seen so far? Not necessarily what you don't want to talk about, but I mean, as you've been around for 3 weeks, what has really caught your interest? Okay,
well, I think it's interesting. I mean, court cases, of course, have been on the front page of the paper every day, and we get asked about it a lot. And we don't comment on the cases per se, but it is interesting to note. I mean, the laws provide the right for people to, if they feel their rights have not been respected, to go to court. So basically what we're watching is the rule of law in action, which, although it's called certainty to the electoral timelines and such things, which I understand, in terms of the principles of an election, I mean, it's been quite an interesting and impressive process in many regards. And I know some of the cases are ongoing as well. So there's even another one. Well, I think one of the disqualified candidates has said he may take the case further. I don't know how that stands.
Yeah.
And there have been other cases about the special voting and the pink sheets and such things.
Yeah, and that one is done too.
So that's been quite an interesting process to see of how the courts interact. And I think in that sense, I mean, it's quite an impressive sort of structure for the elections here. I think I would offer a comment only because we offered it last time, that the timelines perhaps need to be looked at.
Okay.
Where a dispute about one element very quickly creates a crisis in the timeline and the preparation for the election, which is perhaps could be avoided if the timelines were different, but that's for the future. Okay. We've also, of course, taken note of the there was a very sort of high-profile issue of violence here in Accra, unfortunately, a few days ago. And I know various comments and statements have been made about that. That's a very sort of an unfortunate incident. I mean, there's no sort of place for violence in an election. So I think, like everyone else, we hope that is addressed and that's condemned by all. But Ghana has another interesting thing we see in action here, is what I call the election architecture. Not only is there an election commission, but there's IPAC, there's the election security task forces, there's the active involvement of civil society, religious leaders. People get very much involved in the election here, urging peaceful elections, and that's quite impressive. And I saw that in 2012, and that's another factor of these elections.
Is it of any interest to you, though, despite the fact that, as you say, the timelines could be better, but considering that you find that in observing the elections here, people would rather go to the courts to have a court pronounced, and people accept what the court says rather than take the law into their own hands?
No, it's really good in a sense. I know, as I say, I know it creates a degree of uncertainty, but it's very impressive. Very impressive, and I think hopefully the electoral process is the stronger for it, because you have rulings, you have new consensus emerging, so that next time you don't run into the same problems, hopefully.
Hopefully,
yes.
We'll have a precedent for some of the things. Would you have some final words before we say goodbye?
No, I'd just like to say, the EU is here observing, and we very much hope for a peaceful election, an inclusive election, and the key thing is a transparent election for the people of Ghana to have confidence in the outcome.
Fantastic. Mark Stevens is Deputy Chief Observer of the European Union Election Observation Mission, Ghana 2016. Mark, thank you for coming through, and we hope to have a conversation with you, maybe when the elections are done.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure.
All right. All the best to you. So you're still tuned into Starr FM. This is Starr 103.5 FM in Accra.